The obsession, the world, the internet, everyone is waiting. They're hoping for this moment where you and Jennifer run into each other so they can take their picture.
I'll run into Jen. She's a good friend.
For years, fans watched Brad Pitt fall in and out of love with Hollywood's biggest names. But now, at 61, he's breaking his silence and revealing the real reason he'll never walk down the aisle again. It's not what you think. This isn't just about heartbreak. It's about years of hidden pain, personal growth, and a revelation that stunned even those closest to him. What changed? Why now? His confession flips the script on everything we thought we knew. There was a time when Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were the golden couple of Hollywood. Their love story seemed like something straight out of a romantic movie. They met in the late 90s, and from the moment they appeared on the red carpet together, fans couldn't get enough. They were both huge stars, beautiful, successful, and completely in love. Or so it looked. Their wedding in 2000 was grand and magical. Fireworks, choirs, a custom-designed engagement ring. Every detail was perfect. Jennifer promised to make Brad his favorite banana milkshake in her vows, and the world collectively swooned. It felt like a fairy tale. Over the next few years, they ruled Hollywood, showing up at premieres, winning awards, and even launching a production company together. Everything on the outside looked flawless. But underneath all that sparkle, things weren't so simple. As Brad's career kept growing and Jennifer focused on starting a family, their paths began to drift apart. Then came 2005. Out of nowhere, or at least it seemed that way to the public, they announced their split. Fans were shocked. The media exploded with rumors, especially after Brad was soon seen with Angelina Jolie, his co-star from Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The love triangle headlines flooded the internet. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a cultural moment, and that was only the beginning of Brad's next great love story and next great heartbreak. His relationship with Angelina Jolie was electric. Their chemistry on screen turned into something real off-screen. Soon they were inseparable. They traveled the world, adopted children together, and eventually had biological kids too. Their family grew quickly, 6 children in total. They lived in castles in France, went on humanitarian missions, and looked like a powerful, unstoppable team. For years, people watched Brangelina like royalty. When they finally got married in 2014, it felt like a long-awaited moment. Their kids were part of the ceremony, decorating the dress, baking the cake, even helping write the vows. It was intimate and beautiful. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. The stress of fame, family life, and personal struggles started to weigh on them. Then, in 2016, everything fell apart. Angelina filed for divorce just 2 years after the wedding. What followed was years of legal battles over custody, money, and even a winery they owned together. There were serious allegations, public documents, and deep emotional wounds. The fairy tale was over. And this time, it was darker, messier, and far more painful. Brad's 2 most high-profile relationships had both ended in heartbreak. What once looked like perfect love stories became emotional roller coasters, and while the public kept watching, speculating, and hoping for reconciliations, Brad was left dealing with the real-life consequences: love, loss, regret, and reflection. LaShawn, after the dust settled from 2 of the most high-profile breakups in Hollywood, Brad Pitt found himself standing alone, not just without a partner, but emotionally drained, publicly scrutinized, and privately broken in ways few truly understood. The world had watched him fall in love with Jennifer Aniston, then fall even harder with Angelina Jolie. And when both marriages crumbled, so did parts of Brad. The split from Jennifer had been painful, no doubt. But it was his divorce from Angelina that left deeper scars. Their relationship hadn't just been about romance. It was a shared life, a shared home, and a shared family of 6 kids. When that unraveled, it wasn't just a love story ending. It was an entire world collapsing. For a while, Brad retreated. He wasn't showing up at red carpets smiling like he used to. Behind the scenes, he was dealing with court hearings, custody battles, headlines full of accusations, and a storm of emotions he hadn't fully processed. The media had a field day with every document, every quote, every facial expression. But Brad was quietly trying to keep it together. In interviews, you could see the shift. He wasn't the same smooth-talking heartthrob from years past. He was rawer, more thoughtful, sometimes even fragile. He talked about his struggles, especially with alcohol. He admitted that the pain of divorce pushed him to reevaluate his life, that he had been living in denial, numbing himself instead of facing the real hurt, and now he had no choice but to sit with it, feel it, learn from it. He started going to therapy. He leaned into sculpting, creating art as a way of letting things out that words couldn't express. In one interview, he said he found peace in shaping clay, in the quiet rhythm of creating something with his hands. It was meditative, healing even. There was also the matter of his children. For Brad, the hardest part wasn't the media frenzy. It was the fractured relationship with his kids. Some of them were distant, some he hardly saw. That was the wound that never stopped hurting. No amount of fame, wealth, or critical acclaim could fix that loss, and he knew it would take time, maybe years, to rebuild those bridges. If they could be rebuilt at all. Still, Brad didn't stop trying. He kept showing up to court. He stayed sober. He worked on himself, quietly, steadily. Sometimes the progress was invisible. Other times, it showed in the small smiles during interviews, the calm in his voice, the humility in his words. Then, in late 2022, a new chapter began. It wasn't loud or flashy. No viral wedding photos. No A-list couple debut. Just a quiet relationship with a woman named Inés de Ramón, a jewelry executive far from the Hollywood spotlight. Their first public appearance was at a Bono concert, holding hands, laughing like two people just enjoying each other's company. It was different, simpler. With Inés, there were no tabloid wars or media pressure. She wasn't trying to become famous, and Brad wasn't trying to impress the world. They just fit. Friends close to Brad noticed the difference. He was more relaxed, more grounded. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, he looked truly content. But even with new love, Brad made one thing clear. Marriage was off the table. He had been burned too badly. The long, brutal divorce with Angelina, especially the custody battle, had left a permanent mark. He wasn't ready to go through anything like that again. He didn't want the legal mess, the emotional toll, or the risk of another devastating fallout. And honestly, who could blame him? Instead, Brad focused on building something meaningful with Inés, without the pressure of rings or papers. They moved in together in 2024, hosted quiet dinners, traveled when his filming schedule allowed it. They kept things private, even when the world kept asking questions. Inés became a real support system. According to sources, she was the one who encouraged Brad to finally settle the remaining legal matters with Angelina. Not because she pushed, but because she reminded him that peace was possible, that life could be lighter, easier, if he chose to let go of the war. That meant something to Brad. He started letting go of old pain. He accepted that he might never have the same relationship with his kids again. But that didn't mean he'd stop trying. He stopped fighting every battle and started picking the ones that mattered. The ones about peace, healing, stability. He knew he had made mistakes. He had owned them. But he also knew he couldn't live forever in the shadow of regret. Now, at 61, Brad Pitt isn't chasing the same dreams he once did. He isn't trying to be Hollywood's leading man or anyone's idea of perfect. He just wants to live honestly, quietly, and maybe, with a little luck, happily. His story isn't wrapped up in a neat Hollywood ending. There's no final scene where everything magically comes together. But that's okay, because healing doesn't always look like a big finish. Sometimes it's slow, quiet progress. A walk through a vineyard, a dinner with someone who understands you, a phone call with a child, a piece of art shaped by your own hands. For Brad, the long road after divorce wasn't about finding a new fairy tale. It was about facing the truth, feeling the pain, and learning to live again, with scars, with lessons, and with hope. And maybe that's the real love story. After years of public heartbreak, messy legal battles, and deeply personal struggles, Brad Pitt wasn't looking for love. He wasn't out at every Hollywood party or chasing headlines anymore. In fact, he had grown quiet, more focused on art, therapy, and healing than ever before. And that's exactly when Inés de Ramón walked into his life. It wasn't some red carpet moment or dramatic romance sparked on a movie set. Their connection started low-key, almost under the radar. She wasn't a movie star. She wasn't chasing fame. Inés was a jewelry executive, smart, calm, and far from the chaos Brad had known in the past. Their first public appearance together was at a Bono concert in late 2022. They were spotted holding hands, laughing. No big announcement, no spectacle, just two people enjoying the moment. And for Brad, that quietness meant everything. He had spent so many years living under a microscope, Every smile, every frown, every relationship was picked apart by the press. His divorces from both Jennifer Aniston and Angelina Jolie weren't just personal. They were public events. Millions of strangers had opinions about his life, his choices, and his pain. But with Inez, it was different. She gave him something he hadn't had in a long time: peace. Friends close to Brad noticed the shift. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. He wasn't carrying the same weight on his shoulders. Being with Inez didn't feel like a performance. It felt like real life. In 2024, the relationship grew even more serious. They quietly moved in together. Brad's Los Feliz mansion became their shared space. Not a flashy Hollywood home, but a cozy lived-in place, where they hosted dinners, shared laughs, and built a routine. Their guests included friends from both of their worlds: directors, musicians, artists, fashion insiders. The vibe was casual, welcoming, nothing like the red carpet glitz Brad had been used to for decades. Inez was described by those who met her as grounded, thoughtful, and easy to be around. She wasn't trying to change Brad. She didn't compete with his past. She simply supported him. And perhaps that's why she became such an important part of his life. But there was more to it than just love and comfort. Inez played a real role in helping Brad let go of some of the baggage that had haunted him for years. Insiders say she encouraged him to finally settle the long-running divorce issues with Angelina Jolie. For nearly 8 years, Brad and Angelina had been locked in a war over custody, finances, and their French estate. The headlines were exhausting. The courtroom drama never seemed to end. But Inez wasn't pushy. She was patient. She simply reminded Brad that life could be better on the other side of peace. That happiness wasn't possible if you were still holding on to every grudge, every fight, every piece of the past. And eventually, Brad listened. In late 2024, the divorce was finally settled. It was a huge relief. One source close to the situation said Brad felt like a weight had finally lifted off his shoulders. And Inez was right there beside him, not celebrating with champagne, but simply offering a quiet smile and the support he needed. Still, even with everything going so well, marriage was a sensitive topic. Brad had told friends he wasn't planning on getting married again. Not because he didn't love Inez, but because he was still carrying the scars of his past. The divorce from Angelina had been brutal. His relationships with some of his children were still strained. He didn't want to walk down that road again. At least, not yet. Inez understood. She didn't pressure him. Their bond didn't need a ring to be real. They were already building a life together, living under one roof, planning trips, sharing responsibilities. They didn't need a big ceremony or headlines to prove anything to anyone. Still, those closest to Brad believed Inez might change his mind one day. Even George Clooney, a longtime friend, had reportedly told Brad that he was lucky to have found someone so stable and supportive. Others agreed. They saw how Inez had helped Brad grow, how she encouraged him to live healthier, more intentionally, and with a greater sense of balance. The two were often spotted out and about, at movie premieres, art events, even the British Grand Prix. But unlike his past relationships, the cameras didn't define them. They weren't posting selfies or giving interviews. They simply lived their life, side by side. Brad, now 61, had gone through enough to know that love wasn't always about passion or headlines. Sometimes, love was showing up every day. Cooking dinner together, walking the dog, flying across the world just to spend a few quiet days together while he filmed a movie in New Zealand. That's what he and Inez had. Not a Hollywood romance, but a human one. Of course, life wasn't perfect. Brad's relationship with some of his children, especially the older ones, remained distant. And that hurt. Deeply. But he was still trying. And having Inez by his side made the trying a little easier. She encouraged him to reach out more, to stay hopeful, even when the response wasn't what he hoped for. For Brad, this relationship wasn't about fixing everything. It was about finding peace where he could, creating joy where possible, and building a future that felt safe. They didn't know what the future would hold. Maybe marriage, maybe not. But for now, Brad Pitt was content. And that, after everything, was more than enough. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from grand gestures or second weddings. Sometimes it comes from the quiet moments, the ones where no one's watching, where love isn't loud, but real. And for Brad Pitt, that's the chapter he's living now, with Inez de Ramon, hand in hand, no script needed. The question hangs in the air like a whisper that never fades. Will Brad Pitt ever marry again? It's a question fans, journalists, and even some of his closest friends have been asking for years. Not because he needs to, not because there's pressure from Hollywood, but because, deep down, people want to believe that after everything he's been through, after the heartbreak, the divorces, the legal fights, Brad still believes in love. Real love. Lasting love. But for Brad, marriage isn't just a romantic idea anymore. It's a wound that never fully healed. His past is written in front-page headlines. His marriages weren't just personal. They were public events followed by millions. First, there was Jennifer Aniston. Their love story was straight out of a movie. They were young, beautiful, and full of promise. But behind all the magazine covers and red carpet smiles, things began to crack. Their split was painful, but surprisingly graceful. They loved each other, they really did. But sometimes love isn't enough. Then came Angelina Jolie. That relationship was a whirlwind. It started with undeniable chemistry on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and quickly grew into a large family, a global mission, and a love story that looked unstoppable. For years, they were Hollywood's power couple. But behind closed doors, the cracks were bigger this time. And when it ended hard. Brad has never tried to hide the pain of that chapter. The custody battle, the emotional toll, the years of legal back and forth, the allegations, the distance from his kids. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a war. And it left scars. So now, years later, Brad finds himself in a very different place. He's 61. He's not chasing roles or fame. He's been more selective with projects. He spends more time working on art, sculpting, and creating, less time giving interviews or playing the Hollywood game. His circle is smaller. His priorities have shifted. And then came Inés de Ramón. No, she's not a movie star. She's not a headline-making celebrity. She's calm, thoughtful, and grounded. A jewelry executive who lives far from the spotlight. And maybe that's exactly what Brad needed. A break from the chaos. Someone who feels like home, not a headline. They've been together since late 2022. Quiet at first, then slowly showing up together. Concerts, events, even walking red carpets side by side. They're clearly in love. Friends say Brad hasn't looked this settled in years. He's calmer, more focused, and happier. There's laughter in his life again, so why hasn't he proposed? Because to Brad, marriage isn't just about love anymore. It's about risk. And he's taken that risk twice before. The first time broke his heart, the second time broke his world. He's been through a decade of public pain, and it's changed the way he sees commitment. Sources close to him say it's not that he doesn't love Inés. In fact, they believe he's deeply in love with her. She's helped him let go of the past. She even encouraged him to finally settle his divorce with Angelina after years of drawn-out court battles. But marriage? That's still a step he's not sure he's ready to take. Brad has said it himself. He's content with how things are. He enjoys his life with Inés, the quiet routines, the shared home, the weekends spent entertaining friends and cooking dinners. They live together. They support each other. In many ways, they already have what looks and feels like a marriage, but there's still that hesitation. One insider explained it like this. Brad has been burned badly. He's hesitant to legally tie himself to someone again. Not because he doesn't believe in love, but because he's seen what happens when love falls apart in the courtroom. He's also still carrying pain around his children. His relationship with the older ones is strained, maybe even broken, and that haunts him. That makes him feel like something inside him is still unfinished, like there's a chapter that hasn't been closed. Until that part of his life finds healing, it's hard for him to move fully into something new. Still, those who know Brad say there's hope. They believe Inés might be the one person who can shift his view. She doesn't pressure him. She doesn't push for a wedding. But she brings peace. And peace, after all these years, might be the most powerful kind of love. Even some of Brad's closest friends like George Clooney have encouraged him to consider taking the next step. Not because it's expected, but because they see how far he's come and how much brighter his life looks with Inés in it. But for now, Brad is keeping things simple. He's focusing on the present, not rushing into anything. And maybe that's the healthiest choice of all. Because after everything he's endured, what he needs most isn't a new marriage. It's a sense of control over his own happiness. And Inés gives him that, not with a ring, not with a ceremony, but with presence, with calm, with love that isn't conditional on anything. Will he ever marry again? Maybe, maybe not. If he does, it won't be for the cameras or the headlines. It'll be quiet, private, a moment between two people who found each other after a long road of heartbreak and growth. And if he doesn't, that's okay too, because what Brad Pitt has learned, what life has taught him, is that love isn't always about promises made in front of crowds. Sometimes it's about waking up next to someone who brings peace to your soul, about choosing them every day, even without the paperwork. So for now, Brad isn't looking for a wedding. He's looking for peace, and in Inez, it seems like he's finally found it.